standing here at the confluence of the Licking River and the Ohio River, about 67 miles from here, as the Licking River meanders through northern Kentucky into eastern Kentucky to the Blue Licks State Park. According to the state park brochure, Blue Licks became Kentucky's 5th park in 1927 due to local citizens who donated land because of the Blue Licks battle that occurred on August 19th, 1782. Leading over 300 Indians and some 50 Canadian Rangers is British Captain William Caldwell. Leading the 180 Kentucky militia were Colonel John Todd, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Boone, and Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Trigg. Historian James David Simpson from the Kentucky Society, The Sons of the American Revolution, in his article, The Strategic Battle of Blue Licks, Kentucky, describes the fighting in the Western Theater. And he quotes as saying, "The fighting was not conducted in a conventional regimented formation of the Eastern Theater, but more accurately described as Indian fighting." The destruction of some of the American settlements at Ruddle and Martin Station and treatment of American prisoners by the British and their Indian allies were most likely on the minds of the Kentucky militia. Simpson goes on to describe how British Captain Caldwell was planning on an attack on Wheeling, West Virginia, but it was canceled when reports that George Rogers Clark was patrolling the area. Instead, Caldwell decided to attack the fort at Bryan Station, and after a couple of days of attacking the fort and no progress, Caldwell and his forces retreated. Determined not to let them reach the Ohio River, Colonel Todd, along with Colonel Daniel Boone, went after the British and Indian forces. The historical brochure at the Blue Licks State Park describes what happened when the Kentucky militia caught up with Caldwell's forces and lists a tale about Major McGarry, who earlier suffered some accusations of being timid, and rallying the men by yelling, "All who are not cowards, follow me," and he charged the river. What's interesting is when we look at Scripture, Deuteronomy 32, 35, and 36, it tells us, "Vengeance is mine, and recompense for the time. For their foot shall slip, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and their doom comes swiftly. For the Lord will vindicate his people and have compassion on his servants, when he sees that their power is gone, and there is none remaining bond or free." Colonel Todd lost about 72 men, and Daniel Boone lost his son Israel during this battle. Had cooler heads prevailed and the Kentucky militia waited for reinforcements, the events of this day may have ended differently. The Blue Licks battle did not last long, 15 minutes, and it was a terrible loss for the Kentucky militia. George Rogers Clark would go on to use this defeat to chase down the Shawnee Indians and destroy villages at Chillicothe, Ohio. Historian Dan Higginbotham describes Clark as having a flair for the dramatic. But he goes on to say, and I quote, "In this last important action, Clark launched a counteroffensive against the Shawnee tribe, driving it back into central Ohio." The significance of the Western campaign is due to the presence of George Rogers Clark. After victories at Kaskaskia and Vincennes, he continued fighting in the Western Territory. The Battle of Blue Licks' importance is rooted in its defeat. Blue Licks encouraged Clark to chase down and defeat the Indians at Chillicothe. Also, the Kentucky's force's defeat was so complete that most settlers had left Kentucky.